In 1998, my grandmother gave me a delicate wind-up music box. Inside was a ballerina that spun slowly to a tinny lullaby. For a while, I loved it, until it started to play by itself. The first time it happened was around 3 a.m. The box was closed, yet the lullaby played faintly in the dark. I got up, wound it down until it stopped, and shoved it into a drawer. But the next night, the same song woke me again. When I finally opened the lid, the ballerina wasn't spinning. She was frozen, her head tilted slightly upward. Then, with slow, chilling creak, her head turned on its own to face me. The next morning, I had long red scratches down my forearm, fresh enough that they bled through my sleeve. The box was wound tight again, though I hadn't touched it. I begged my parents to get rid of it. They humored me, locking it in the attic. But even now, decades later, sometimes I wake in the middle of the night to that same faint lullaby echoing in my head. 3 slow notes, like a warning I can't forget. When my family moved into an old farmhouse in Kansas, I found a filthy rag doll in the attic. It was missing one button eye, and its fabric face was stained and fraying. My little sister begged to keep it, so my parents let her. 2 weeks later, I woke to her screaming. She said the doll had whispered to her, telling her it wanted to borrow her face. We tried to laugh it off, but the next morning she came down to breakfast with a long rip down her pajama shirt, like it had been cut with scissors while she slept. Threads littered her bedspread. One night I snuck into her room to take the doll away. When I picked it up, it felt heavier than it should, like something alive was inside. Its mouth had been stitched into a crooked smile with fresh black thread, stitching that hadn't been there before. The next morning, the doll wasn't in the trash where I left it. It was sitting upright at the foot of my sister's bed, staring at her with its one button eye. We moved a year later, but my sister never slept without the lights on again. In 2015, I took a week-long trip to New Orleans. I wanted to experience the history, the food, the jazz, and maybe some of the darker folklore that hung over the French Quarter. On my second day there, I wandered into a cramped antique shop on Royal Street. The place smelled like dust and old wood, the air heavy with incense. Every corner was stacked with cracked porcelain dolls, chipped carnival masks, and shelves of strange trinkets. What caught my eye was a marionette puppet hanging from the ceiling. It was about 2 feet tall, dressed in a faded jester's costume with tarnished bells at the ends of its hat. The paint on its wooden face was peeling, revealing pale raw wood beneath, and its glass eyes gleamed with an unnatural brightness. The shop owner, an older woman with a raspy voice, noticed me staring. She said, "That one's not for children. Belonged to a puppeteer back in the 1920s, died on stage. Folks say he lives in the puppet now." She chuckled, but her eyes didn't. Against better judgment, I bought it. I told myself it was just for the novelty, a creepy souvenir. That first night, I hung it on the closet door of my Airbnb, At 3 a.m., I woke to the faint jingling of bells. I sat up, and the room was still. The puppet swayed gently, though the air was dead quiet. I got up, set it on the dresser, and went back to bed. The second night, the noises got louder. I woke again, this time to the sound of wooden joints clicking. I turned on the lamp, and I swear its head had shifted to face me. I shoved it back in the closet, wrapping it in a plastic bag. But in the morning, the bag was empty. The marionette was sitting upright on the chair by the window, its strings stretched across the floor like something had been moving it. The fourth night was the worst. I woke not to sound, but to the feeling of weight on my chest. When I opened my eyes, the marionette was sitting on me, its wooden face inches from mine. The strings dragged across my arms, tightening. I screamed and flung it across the room. It hit the wall with a thud, but when I turned the light on, it was gone. The next morning, I checked out early and left the puppet locked in the closet. But when I got home weeks later, my suitcase smelled faintly of incense. Inside, among my clothes, was the marionette, jester bells jingling softly as I pulled it out. I burned it that night in my backyard. The flames turned its wooden body to ash in minutes, but the glass eyes never cracked, never melted. They sat in the embers, gleaming as though they were still watching me. From now on, I'll never buy another puppet again, because it reminds me of the mistake I made when I bought that creepy doll. In the summer of 2014, I rented a small upstairs apartment in Kingston, New York. It was furnished with mismatched furniture that looked like it had been there for decades. On the living room wall hung an old black and white photograph in a cracked frame. Two children in 1930s clothes standing stiffly in front of a farmhouse. The first night, I swore the photo looked different when I turned off the lights. Their faces seemed blurred, eyes darker than they had been before. I told myself that I was just tired and that the lighting was bad. But over the next few days, I noticed the children's faces changing. Subtly at first, a tighter jaw, a sharper glare. Then one night, I walked into the living room and froze. The boy in the photo was no longer standing. He was sitting, crouched in the corner of the frame. The girl's head had tilted, and her eyes were fixed directly on me. I tried to take the picture down, but when I touched the frame, the glass was ice cold. That night, I woke to faint scratching from the living room. When I finally built up the courage to go look, the photo was lying face down on the floor. The glass cracked down the middle. I left it there, but by morning it was hanging back on the wall, perfectly straight. Only now, both children were pressed against the inside of the glass with a chilling frown, and their eyes were pitch black, and their palms were flat as if they were trying to push through. I checked out early, left the keys on the table, and never went back. Months later, out of curiosity, I searched for the listing again. It was gone. But on a local forum, someone mentioned that apartment, specifically the picture of the children who moved when you weren't looking. If you hear a knock at your door after midnight, whatever you do, don't open it. Instead, open up more nightmares here on this channel. Like, subscribe, and comment your story below. if you're brave enough to share it.